Book 2, Chapter 9 of Resurrection. It was morning before Nekhludoff could fall asleep, and therefore he woke up late. At noon 7 men, chosen from among the peasants at the foreman's invitation, came into the orchard where the foreman had arranged a table and benches by digging posts into the ground and fixing boards on the top, under the apple trees. It took some time before the peasants could be persuaded to put on their caps and to sit down on the benches. Especially firm was the ex-soldier, who today had bark shoes on. He stood erect, holding his cap as they do at funerals, according to military regulation, when one of them, a respectable-looking, broad-shouldered old man with a curly, grizzly beard like that of Michelangelo's Moses, and grey hair that curled round the brown, bold forehead, put on his big cap and, wrapping his coat round him, got in behind the table and sat down. The rest followed his example. When all had taken their places, Nekhludoff sat down opposite them, and leaning on the table, over the paper on which he had drawn up his project, he began explaining it. Whether it was that there were fewer present, or that he was occupied with the business in hand and not with himself, anyhow, this time Nekhludoff felt no confusion. He involuntarily addressed the broad-shouldered old man with white ringlets in his grizzly beard, expecting approbation or objections from him. But Nekhludoff's conjecture was wrong. The respectable-looking old patriarch, though he nodded his handsome head approvingly, or shook it and frowned when the others raised an objection, evidently understood with great difficulty, and only when the others repeated what Nekhludoff had said in their own words. A little, almost beardless old fellow, blind in one eye, who sat by the side of the patriarch, and had a patched nankeen coat and old boots on, and, as Nekhludoff found out later, was an oven builder, understood much better. This man moved his brows quickly, attending to Nekhludoff's words with an effort, and at once repeated them in his own way. An old, thick-set man with a white beard and intelligent eyes understood as quickly, and took every opportunity to put in an ironical joke, clearly wishing to show off. The ex-soldier seemed also to understand matters, but got mixed, being used to senseless soldiers' talk. A tall man with a small beard, a long nose, and a bass voice, who wore clean, home-made clothes and new bark-plaited shoes, seemed to be the one most seriously interested. This man spoke only when there was need of it. The 2 other men, the same toothless one who had shouted a distinct refusal at the meeting the day before to every proposal of Nekhludoff's, and a tall, white, lame old man with a kind face, his thin legs tightly wrapped around with strips of linen, said little, though they listened attentively. First of all Nekhludoff explained his views in regard to personal property in land. The land, according to my idea, can neither be bought nor sold, because if it could be, he who has got the money could buy it all, and exact anything he liked for the use of the land from those who have none. "That's true," said the long-nosed man in a deep bass. "Just so," said the ex-soldier. "A woman gathers a little grass for her cow. She's caught and imprisoned," said the white-bearded old man. "Our own land is 5 versts away, and as to renting any, it's impossible. The price is raised so high that it won't pay," added the cross, toothless old man. "They twist us into ropes, worse than during serfdom." "I think as you do, and I count it a sin to possess land, so I wish to give it away," said Nekhludoff. "Well, that's a good thing," said the old man with curls like Angelo's Moses, evidently thinking that Nekhludoff meant to let the land. "I have come here because I no longer wish to possess any land, and now we must consider the best way of dividing it." "Just give it to the peasants, that's all," said the cross, toothless old man. Nekhludoff was abashed for a moment, feeling a suspicion of his not being honest in these words, but he instantly recovered and made use of the remark in order to express what was in his mind in reply. "I should be glad to give it to them," he said, "but to whom and how? To which of the peasants? Why, to your commune and not to that of Deminsk?" That was the name of a neighbouring village with very little land. All were silent. Then the ex-soldier said, "Just so." "Now, then, tell me, how would you divide the land among the peasants if you had to do it?" said Nekhludoff. "We should divide it up equally, so much for every man," said the oven builder, quickly raising and lowering his brows. "How else? Of course, so much per man," said the good-natured lame man with the white strips of linen around his legs. Everyone confirmed this statement, considering it satisfactory. "So much per man? Then are the servants attached to the house also to have a share?" Nekhludoff asked. "Oh no," said the ex-soldier, trying to appear bold and merry. But the tall, reasonable man would not agree with him. "If one is to divide, all must share alike," he said in his deep bass, after a little consideration. "It can't be done," said Nekhludoff, who had already prepared his reply. "If all are to share alike, then those who do not work themselves, do not plough, will sell their shares to the rich. The rich will again get at the land. Those who live by working the land will multiply, and land will again be scarce. Then the rich will again get those who need land into their power." "Just so," quickly said the ex-soldier. "Forbid to sell the land. Let only him who ploughs it have it," angrily interrupted the oven builder. To this Nekhludoff replied that it was impossible to know who was ploughing for himself and who for another. The tall, reasonable man proposed that an arrangement be made so that they should all plough communally, and those who ploughed should get the produce, and those who did not should get nothing. To this communistic project Nekhludoff had also an answer ready. He said that for such an arrangement it would be necessary that all should have ploughs, and that all the horses should be alike, so that none should be left behind, and that ploughs and horses and all the implements would have to be communal property, and that in order to get that, all the people would have to agree. "Our people could not be made to agree in a lifetime," said the cross old man. "We should have regular fights," said the white-bearded old man with the laughing eyes. "So that the thing is not as simple as it looks," said Nekhludoff, "and this is a thing not only we, but many have been considering. There is an American, Henry George. This is what he has thought out, and I agree with him." "Why, you are the master, and you give it as you like. What's it to you? The power is yours," said the cross old man. This confused Nekhludoff, but he was pleased to see that not he alone was dissatisfied with this interruption. "You wait a bit, Uncle Simon. Let him tell us about it," said the reasonable man in his imposing bass. This emboldened Nekhludoff, and he began to explain Henry George's single tax system. "The earth is no man's, it is God's," he began. "Just so, that it is," several voices replied. "The land is common to all have the same right to it. But there is good land and bad land, and everyone would like to take the good land. How is one to do in order to get it justly divided? In this way, he that will use the good land must pay those who have got no land the value of the land he uses," Nekhludoff went on, answering his own question. "As it would be difficult to say who should pay whom, and money is needed for communal use, it should be arranged that he who uses the good land should pay the amount of the value of his land to the commune for its needs. Then everyone would share equally. If you want to use land, pay for it. More for the good, less for the bad land. If you do not wish to use land, don't pay anything. And those who use the land will pay the taxes and the communal expenses for you." "Well, he had a head, this George," said the oven builder, moving his brows. "He who has good land must pay more." "If only the payment is according to our strength," said the tall man with the bass voice, evidently foreseeing how the matter would end. "The payment should not be too high and not too low. If it is too high, it will not get paid, and there will be a loss. And if it's too low, it will be bought and sold. There would be a trading in land. This is what I wish to arrange among you here." "That is just, that is right. Yes, that would do," said the peasants. "He has a head, this George," said the broad-shouldered old man with the curls. "See what he has invented." "Well, then, how would it be if I wished to take some land?" asked the smiling foreman. "If there's an allotment to spare, take it and work it," said Nekhludoff. "What do you want it for? You have sufficient as it is," said the old man with the laughing eyes. With this the conference ended. Nekhludoff repeated his offer and advised the men to talk it over with the rest of the commune and to return with the answer. The peasants said they would talk it over and bring an answer, and left in a state of excitement. Their loud talk was audible as they went along the road, and up to late in the night the sound of voices came along the river from the village. The next day the peasants did not go to work, but spent it in considering the landlord's offer. The commune was divided into two parties, one which regarded the offer as a profitable one to themselves and saw no danger in agreeing with it, and another which suspected and feared the offer it did not understand. On the third day, however, all agreed, and some were sent to Nekhludoff to accept his offer. They were influenced in their decision by the explanation some of the old men gave of the landlord's conduct, which did away with all fear of deceit. They thought the gentleman had begun to consider his soul, and was acting as he did for its salvation. The alms which Nekhludoff had given away while in Panovo made his explanation seem likely. The fact that Nekhludoff had never before been face to face with such great poverty and so bare a life as the peasants had come to in this place, and was so appalled by it, made him give away money in charity, though he knew that this was not reasonable. He could not help giving the money, of which he now had a great deal, having received a large sum for the forest he had sold the year before, and also the hand money for the implements and stock in Kuzminsky. As soon as it was known that the master was giving money in charity, crowds of people, chiefly women, began to come to ask him for help. He did not in the least know how to deal with them, how to decide how much and whom to give it to. He felt that to refuse to give money, of which he had a great deal, to poor people was impossible, yet to give casually to those who asked was not wise. The last day he spent in Panovo, Nekhludoff looked over the things left in his aunt's house, and in the bottom drawer of the mahogany wardrobe, with the brass lions' heads with rings through them, he found many letters, and amongst them a photograph of a group consisting of his aunts Sophia Ivanovna and Mary Ivanovna, a student, and Katusha. Of all the things in the house he took only the letters and the photograph. The rest he left to the miller, who, at the smiling foreman's recommendation, had bought the house and all it contained to be taken down and carried away at 1/10 of the real value. Recalling the feeling of regret at the loss of his property which he had felt in Kuzminsky, Nekhludoff was surprised how he could have felt this regret. Now he felt nothing but unceasing joy at the deliverance, and a sensation of newness, something like that which a traveller must experience when discovering new countries. End of Book 2, Chapter 9. Book 2, Chapter 10 of Resurrection. The town struck Nekhludoff in a new and peculiar light on his return. He came back in the evening when the gas was lit, and drove from the railway station to his house, where the rooms still smelt of naphthalene. Agrafena Petrovna and Korney were both feeling tired and dissatisfied, and had even had a quarrel over those things that seemed made only to be aired and packed away. Nekhludoff's room was empty, but not in order, and the way to it was blocked up with boxes, so that his arrival evidently hindered the business which, owing to a curious kind of inertia, was going on in this house. The evident folly of these proceedings, in which he had once taken part, was so distasteful to Nekhludoff after the impressions the misery of the life of the peasants had made on him, that he decided to go to a hotel the next day, leaving Agrafena Petrovna to put away the things as she thought fit until his sister should come and finally dispose of everything in the house. Nekhludoff left home early and chose a couple of rooms in a very modest and not particularly clean lodging-house within easy reach of the prison, and, having given orders that some of his things should be sent there, he went to see the advocate. It was cold out of doors. After some rainy and stormy weather it had turned out cold, as it often does in spring. It was so cold that Nekhludoff felt quite chilly in his light overcoat, and walked fast, hoping to get warmer. His mind was filled with thoughts of the peasants, the women, children, old men, and all the poverty and weariness which he seemed to have seen for the first time, especially the smiling, old-faced infant writhing with his calfless little legs. And he could not help contrasting what was going on in the town. Passing by the butchers', fishmongers', and clothiers' shops, he was struck, as if he saw them for the first time, by the appearance of the clean, well-fed shopkeepers, like whom you could not find one peasant in the country. These men were apparently convinced that the pains they took to deceive the people who did not know much about their goods was not a useless, but rather an important business. The coachmen with their broad hips and rows of buttons down their sides, and the doorkeepers with gold cords on their caps, the servant girls with their aprons and curly fringes, and especially the smart izvozchiks, with the nape of their necks clean shaved, as they sat lolling back in their traps and examined the passers-by with dissolute and contemptuous air, looked well fed. In all these people Nekhludoff could not now help seeing some of these very peasants who had been driven into the town by lack of land. Some of the peasants driven to the town had found means of profiting by the conditions of town life, and had become like the gentlefolk, and were pleased with their position. Others were in a worse position than they had been in the country, and were more to be pitied than the country people. Such seemed the bootmakers Nekhludoff saw in the cellar, the pale dishevelled washerwomen with their thin bare arms ironing at an open window, out of which streamed soapy steam. Such the two house painters with their aprons, stockingless feet, all bespattered and smeared with paint, whom Nekhludoff met, their weak brown arms bared to above the elbows, carrying a pail full of paint and quarrelling with each other. Their faces looked haggard and cross. The dark faces of the carters, jolting along in their carts, bore the same expression, and so did the faces of the tattered men and women who stood begging at the street corners. The same kind of faces were to be seen at the open windows of the eating-houses which Nekhludoff passed. By the dirty tables on which stood tea-things and bottles, and between which waiters dressed in white shirts were rushing hither and thither, sat shouting and singing red perspiring men with stupefied faces. One sat by the window with lifted brows and pouting lips and fixed eyes, as if trying to remember something. "And why are they all gathered here?" Nekhludoff thought, breathing in, together with the dust which the cold wind blew towards him, the air filled with the smell of rank oil and fresh paint. In one street he met a row of carts loaded with something made of iron that rattled so on the uneven pavement that it made his ears and head ache. He started walking still faster in order to pass the row of carts, when he heard himself called by name. He stopped and saw an officer with sharp pointed moustaches and shining face, who sat in the trap of a swell izvozchik and waved his hand in a friendly manner, his smile disclosing unusually long white teeth. "Nekhludoff, can it be you?" Nekhludoff's first feeling was one of pleasure. "Ah, Schonbock!" he exclaimed joyfully, but he knew the next moment that there was nothing to be joyful about. This was that Schonbock who had been in the house of Nekhludoff's aunts that day, and whom Nekhludoff had quite lost out of sight, but about whom he had heard that in spite of his debts he had somehow managed to remain in the cavalry, and by some means or other still kept his place among the rich. His gay, contented appearance corroborated this report. What a good thing that I have caught you. There is no one in town. Ah, old fellow, you have grown old," he said, getting out of the trap and moving his shoulders about. "I only knew you by your walk. Look here, we must dine together. Is there any place where they feed one decently?" "I don't think I can spare the time," Nekhludoff answered, thinking only of how he could best get rid of his companion without hurting him. "And what has brought you here?" he asked. "Business, old fellow. Guardianship business. I am a guardian now. I am managing Samonov's affairs, the millionaire, you know. He has softening of the brain. And he's got 54,000 desatins of land," he said, with peculiar pride, as if he himself made all these desatins. "The affairs were terribly neglected. All the land was let to the peasants. They did not pay anything. There were more than 80,000 roubles debt. I changed it all in 1 year, and have got 70% more out of it. What do you think of that?" he asked proudly. Nekhludoff remembered having heard that this Schonbock, just because he had spent all he had attained by some special influence the post of guardian to a rich old man who was squandering his property, and was now evidently living by this guardianship. "How am I to get rid of him without offending him?" thought Nekhludoff, looking at his full, shiny face with the stiffened moustache, and listening to his friendly, good-humoured chatter about where one gets fed best, and his bragging about his doings as a guardian. "Well then, where do we dine?" "Really, I have no time to spare," said Nekhludoff, glancing at his watch. "Then, look here, tonight at the races. Will you be there?" "No, I shall not be there." "Do come. I have none of my own now, but I back Grisha's horses. You remember, he has a fine stud. You'll come, won't you, and we'll have some supper together." "No, I cannot have supper with you either," said Nekhludoff with a smile. "Well, that's too bad. And where are you off to now? Shall I give you a lift?" "I am going to see an advocate, close to here, round the corner." "Oh, yes, of course. You have got something to do with the prisons, have turned into a prisoner's mediator, I hear," said Schonbock, laughing. "The Korchagins told me. They have left town already. What does it all mean? Tell me." Yes, it is quite true," Nekhludoff answered, "but I cannot tell you about it in the street." "Of course. You were always a crank. But you will come to the races?" "No, I neither can nor wish to come. Please do not be angry with me." "Angry? Dear me, no. Where do you live?" And suddenly his face became serious, his eyes fixed, and he drew up his brows. He seemed to be trying to remember something, and Nekhludoff noticed the same dull expression as that of the man with the raised brows and pouting lips whom he had seen at the window of the eating-house. "How cold it is it not?" "Have you got the parcels?" said Schonbock, turning to the izvozchik. "All right, good-bye. I am very glad indeed to have met you." And warmly pressing Nekhludoff's hand, he jumped into the trap and waved his white-gloved hand in front of his shiny face, with his usual smile showing his exceptionally white teeth. "Can I have also been like that?" Nekhludoff thought, as he continued his way to the advocate's. "Yes, I wished to be like that, though I was not quite like it, and I thought of living my life in that way." End of chapter 10.